Here are 8 ways to protect yourself against the narcissistic DARVO method when you're going through family court, family violence court, or property settlement or children's.
Hello, Laura.
Welcome,
Hi,
Mum.
everyone.
Now, it sounds like a very depressing topic to talk about, but it's really important that we approach this, give you some 8 ways to deal with this strategy, because the DARVO method seems to be prevalent at the moment. Everyone's talking about it, but no one's talking about how to counteract it when it comes to going through court against someone like this. So, Mum, I'm just going to quickly say what the DARVO method is, and then we're going to get into it about the court strategy. So DARVO means deny, attack, reverse, victim, offender. So basically what they're doing is, if you go to court and you say, such and such, he's bad, he's done X, Y, Z, their response back is going to be, I never did that. You're actually the crazy person and you're doing all these horrible things to me and you're the worst person in the world. So it's making themselves the victim, denying everything you've accused them of, and making you look like the bad guy. And it is a very common strategy. And we do talk about it a little bit in the narcissistic playbook. But it's all well and good to talk about that method and everyone knows about it. And if you don't, you can go and watch some other videos to get into the actual semantics of it. But what we want to talk today, Mum, is about how do you stop your ex from using this deny, reverse, and attack strategy against you when you're going through all of these things. And I'm just going to put a trigger warning here for anyone listening today. There may be, when we're talking about family violence, that you may find triggering. If you do, please call Lifeline or please call 1-800-RESPECT to discuss if this sounds similar to your situation.
Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galpin, with 35 years experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom.
So, Mum, the main aim of these people in court seems to be to bombard the court with heaps of stuff, confusing he said, she said. So the judge has just got no idea. And usually their aim is to get the judge to be just as manipulated and convinced as these people in the past were. And they need that noise to cover up their lies. So have you seen this DARVO strategy being used a lot?
Absolutely, I have. That denying is one of the great confusing things for a human. When someone puts something, particularly if they put it in an affidavit and sworn it or affirmed it as true, literally the gospel truth, it's gobsmacking for a person to have that used against. And also, too, they've obviously can be lawyers if they're represented. And now they send this stuff. Your lawyer reads it and goes, oh, well, explain yourself, please. We've heard this. This is this. And it can be just devastating. So that even your own advisor asking you these things, putting that proposition to you, that the denial, the attacks, the reversal of victim and offender. And you've got to have an enormous lot of strength and support to stand up against that.
Now, that can be the outcome if you don't prepare and strategize in advance. And what kind of people, Mum? So if someone's listening to this today and we're going to give these 8 strategies, what kind of people should think about using these strategies? What kind of ex is the kind of person who usually does
the worst ex? They're the ones who would rather use up all the money, hurt the people in their family, rather than let the other person win, let you win. And if they've been like this through your whole marriage or relationship, if they've been like this with tradesmen, employees, employers, one classic, I heard the guy told her everyone in the world was crazy. And as soon as she realized that, the better. They have this worldview. And while you're in their sphere, they're manipulating you to believe the same things. So the sort of people who use it is really anyone who wants to keep the fight going, who wants to win. So just look at their past conduct and you'll know that these things are coming for you.
And even if you're not sure if your ex is going to be this type of person, perhaps it's good to employ these strategies for court anyway to really protect yourself moving forward so that you've got a shored up case.
Having a plan, having this in the back of your mind will help you a little bit when those lies start coming through in correspondence and affidavits. So yes, the stuff that you've kept, the records you've kept are important, but also to protect yourself. If you can say, oh, I know what this is, deny, attack, reverse role, it's a little bit comforting to know you're not the only person that does this.
I saw someone describe this, the shoring yourself up with it as, I don't know if anyone's seen The Wizard of Oz. I've seen it a million times, where Dorothy's skipping up to see The Wizard of Oz and they walk into this room and there's flames going and there's a big face and it's all very scary. And he talks in this big booming voice and they're so scared. And then Toto jumps down and runs behind the curtain and it's just this little guy pulling levers and they go and look behind the curtain. They're not scared anymore. They're like, what the heck? So if you know that DARVO is just the curtains, the flames and the levers, and you know that behind the curtain, it's just a scared little person who's just trying anything they can to deflect and to shore themselves up, it does give you some of your power back and go, this is DARVO. This is what they this is what they do because they're scared.
People get surprised about is maybe a couple of weeks into the separation or even with a new partner, they'll suddenly say, oh, I never really loved you. And that's all meant to attack and hurt you.
Yeah. Now, Mum, one thing that we don't have in our 8, and I'm going to address this now, is we don't have grey rocking. And grey rocking is a classic way to respond to narcissistic attacks. And it works great. But why is grey rocking not a great idea?
Strategy, if it were a workplace or something else, or a friend, but this is going to go to court. And if you don't respond, if you do go grey rock and don't respond at all, you leave yourself open for the court to misinterpret your silence as acceptance of what they've said. And you allow your ex-partner to run the whole thing, that it's their narrative that will run through the case.
And if your ex is a master manipulator, like we've said, they can easily manipulate the court. They can easily manipulate lawyers. So if you just hope that all the truth will just come out magically on its own, unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work. You're going to have to do some of the work. And came down to he said, she said, the manipulator's going to win. So there are strategies that you can do to help. Let's get into these strategies.
Can I just post, most manipulators come undone in the witness box on the final hearing, but there's a lot goes on beforehand, and if their affidavits keep their narrative up, it may be that the court wonders why this person has been running the case for so long when they're shown, but it's too late because there's been decisions made along the way that are the beginnings of the court case, really, from the beginning.
Yeah. What kind of DARVO things do you see for property? When are they reversing it? And
saying that they had all these properties when they got together, when we got married, like my financial contribution at the beginning. And again, evidence wins there. They may have had 2 properties, but there may have been a tiny little bit of equity. Or they'll deny that you had any money at the beginning, or they'll deny that you had a car. So all of these things you need to go back through, get evidence, photo, bank statements, check property records. But it also happens in children's matters where they are suddenly the primary carer, according to them, through the years. And they may well have taken on some of those roles leading up to separation, knowing that they were going to go. And they're putting their chess pieces, i.e. your children, in place for that. And of course, in family violence, you see a lot of counter applications for family violence. If you put one on one person and they put one on you, the court goes, and it's very hard to establish. And it adds to the stress of you having come out of that relationship and then being bombarded with all of these lies. It's exhausting.
So if you are interested in going into the nitty-gritty of the children's stuff and being used as chess pieces, we have a great episode called How to Avoid Your Children Being Used as Chess Pieces. But we are going to go into some of those strategies today with these 8. So number 1, the one I think that is something everyone should maybe consider doing if they are concerned, and that is all communication needs to be written.
It's got to be text. The reason is that they will otherwise deny they said things. And the most valuable texts and emails and things to have are usually the ones before they wised up and started to, manipulate the narrative. So the ones that they sent before maybe you separated are good examples. But otherwise, they'll just flatly deny that they said it. And they'll accuse you of having said stuff that you didn't say. It's very helpful to be able to go, and here's the proof.
So if they say, oh, I just want to talk to you on the phone, you just be like, no, please send me an email. Or if you've got children, there is the Our Family Wizard, Our Children. There are a whole array of platforms that you can choose from, and you can subscribe to that and get them to communicate that way, which is great if you do need that later as evidence for court. The downside to having text messages and emails is you do have to go back and find them and categorize them, etc. So be aware of that if you are going to do it that way, that it's all to one email address or it's to one phone, or if you screenshot it and save it in a file or email it to yourself so that you've got all of that. But basically, you're keeping receipts on their behavior and you're showing your behavior as well. But like Mum said, if you speak to them on the phone, or if you speak to them at a handover more than a couple of sentences, they're going to say, she did this or he did that. And you've got no proof.
And so the court comes in halfway through a row, really. They don't understand the dynamics leading up. So the times that you have been abused and insulted and misled and they goad you, you may bubble up and say something unwise, and they may be recording it, and they have the annoyingly reasonable voice, and then they use that in evidence. So, yeah.
And that brings us to our next one, which is respond instead of react. So one of the things they will try and do is do this DARVO method and deny it and then accuse you of something and reverse it. And you'll be so shocked or so offended to think, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would accuse me of that. You know that I always did this and I've always done this. And how dare you say that? I've put up with so much. And can you see how the emotion and the reaction to that already is something they could capture in you?
Because then they can write back a seemingly sensible response, and it just feeds into what narratives they've got. Also, too, they've got more things to attack you on, and that's what they love, people who are manipulative and controlling. Yeah. And look, you can't help it. It's a real mic drop moment when is that the right thing? A right mic drop moment when they say some stuff that you absolutely know 100% is untrue. And in fact, you're the one who did these nice things. The one thing I'd love everyone to do is, if you can manage it, don't respond in the moment. Okay? Don't respond in the moment.
Yes.
Talk to your family and friends if you need to, look at the evidence that you've got, and then a cool response is much better. So maybe tomorrow, and try to just keep it, say, well, this was expected. I'm not surprised. Why am I surprised?
Yes. And just remind yourself, it's just that little person behind the curtain. And you're right, Mum, because that's the thing. We've talked about the pendulum swing, where someone has been through DV and they've done nothing. They've put up with it. They've kept quiet. And now they're like, no, I'm not taking their crap anymore. I'm going to put my foot down and I'm going to call it like it is. But that can be captured. That reaction can be captured. And they'll flip that and say, she's the abuser or he's the abuser. So you have to be so careful. So in order to respond instead of react to anything that they do, you need to stay on point. And that's our next step. And that is, you can follow our communication compass if you like. And that is be nice or polite-ish, be short, be exact, and write without emotion. So that's north, south, east, and west. And we'll pop that in so you guys can download that if you like we'll also shoot it through if you need it. But so that's be nice, be exact, keep it short, and without emotion. And that means you're responding, not
That's
reacting.
Right. That's exactly right. I watched some YouTube videos on the DARVO method, which I thought was very helpful. Yeah. And what they are saying is to respond in the moment is exactly what the other person wants. So don't give them that feed. And they talk about narcissistic collapse and narcissistic injury. But the main thing that he said that I thought was great was, if you've already answered a question and you've got it in writing, then you cut and paste it and respond again and say, as I said last week, see below. And that way, whenever they go to use a photocopy or a printout or anything, your initial response is there. So they can't like ignore your proper response earlier and just say, look, she told me no, or I've told her before. And how do I know? And we've seen someone like the case,
so
in
that's
court, the whole case in court collapsed because someone was able to produce the records that showed that they had done the thing they were accused of not doing.
That's valid, Mum, because like you said, we can't grey rock. You can't just go, oh, I'm not going to respond to this, because they can then use it and say, look, I asked for this information, or I did this, and no response. So you do have to sometimes do your response. But like you said, if it's just a copy paste, it's not giving them any of your energy and any of your time. It's literally as per my last email in a way, but having it there so that those manipulators can't change the story by saying, oh, look, she didn't write back or he didn't write back, when you've probably written it seven times.
I'm always
advance
suspicious
before.
when a client gets a letter that's a little bit, or an email, a little bit out of character. Maybe it starts off with dear such and such. And you go, hang on a minute, and ends with regards, and then has a little bit of a sermon in it as well. We should work together to, and you thought, oh, this is what we always called evidence gathering. They're just trying to pin you down.
Right.
And so I think it's very hard to keep repeating it, but it's like dealing with perhaps a toddler having a tantrum. There's nothing you can really do to make it just clear and firm about what you had said and say, I've told you this before, why are you ignoring it?
And that comes to our next strategy, which is having firm boundaries. So those firm boundaries are, you've explained it once, you copy and paste it over and over again, because there's no need to keep giving them new information. There's no need to keep arguing. But also firm boundaries, like we've said, don't let them come into the house. Don't talk to them on the phone. If this is the kind of ex you have, you need to have those firm boundaries in place for your mental health as well, because their aim is to put all this information into the court and get your reaction and say, look, it's them, they're the person that's bad, I'm the victim. So you need those boundaries so that you can stay calm, you can keep the emotion out of it. And I've seen it happen many times where, understandably so, the people spiral and they go, I can't believe they said that about me, blah, blah, blah. Even if they're not talking to the other person, they're in this mental spiral where they're just thinking about it all the time, and they end up going a little crazy because, validly so, your reality is being twisted and turned, and you might not know what reality is at that moment. So if you create those firm boundaries for yourself as well as for them, then you will be able to keep a level head and keep calm, because if you do let the emotion run through you, you may lose. So you really need to have to keep the emotion as much as possible taken care of with you, with the psychologist, and kept away from that person, and keeping yourself moving forwards, looking forwards.
And there is always the potential for an uneducated police officer or a biased police officer, and we know there are some, to misidentify the aggressor when they go to homes. And if there's family violence. And there have been studies that show that in the cases where people are really damaged, really hurt, really assaulted, they've done it a high percentage of the time. I can't remember if it was 10 or 11%. So these guys, or women, I guess, are good talkers, and they'll manipulate the police as well. And I used to call it, if you don't love me anymore, you must be crazy. And it is a narrative. We're just starting to turn it around. But you need to hold on to your thoughts. And I think if you write down the things that they say and do, and maybe in your head, just write down, maybe even on a piece of paper the kids can't find, put down the 10 worst things that you witnessed. And then you can go back and look at that.
And we've talked about this in our episode we did recently where we talked about having a handbrake and reminding yourself, having something that you can tangibly look at to remind yourself, I'm not crazy, this happened. But also being able to, like we said, respond instead of react. And like you said, Mum, in those incidences, sometimes the police walk in on the reaction, not whatever else has happened. So it's so important. That's the beginning. Like that's when you'll notice DARVO starting to happen, I think, for narcissistic types, is in those early stages. But then you're slowly moving into court and getting in front of judges and stuff. And that's when I think you need to be doing some of these other strategies. And most importantly of all,
Yes.
you need evidence. You need to gather that evidence. And you've talked a little bit about this, Mum. So what strategies do you have for people after this initial phase and during that initial phase as well, in the lead up? How and what should they be gathering as evidence to protect themselves?
Because it's in writing, it should be any of the text messages or any of the emails that are exposing the real them. A word about emails. I think you could easily start a new email address, if you like, for the discussion with your ex. Perhaps, if it's appropriate, block them on your old one so they have to use this one and make it clear this is the one they have to use. And don't give it a name that you would be embarrassed about being read in court. I do remember someone once that the guy was in court and they asked for his phone and the wife's phone number was the Wick, was the name. So you've got to be really respectful. But look, you may be able to find photos of you doing something at Christmas or evidence of you signing kids out in and out of daycare, all those sort of things. For the relationship was on the rocks, you'll probably find stuff. And thanks to our magical cloud and iPhones and that, it's often not that hard to prove who was where at what date.
Now, I'm going to pull you up on that because you're saying it's often not hard. But I know you're saying it's magical, the cloud's there and everything, but it can feel to people overwhelming to just go, I don't even know where to start. Like, I can't even. And I do think a stitch in time saves 9. If you can start, like Mum said, start an email address, get them to email to that if you don't have a children's app that you can use. But then send yourself emails with dates and times, screenshots of the things. So it's all collated in one. You don't have to do anything with the emails for the moment, but it's just all there. Now, there's the beautiful app called Arc that you can download and use that for. Or you can also use the Empower You app by the New South Wales Police. But if there is no actual violence, you might think, oh, well, I can't really use that. But physical violence. But some of this stuff is violence. It's manipulation. It's emotional violence. So you can use these apps yourself to collate this stuff or create a system and a strategy and start early. Now, the notes, Mum. So if they're sending themselves an email or writing a note about an incident that's just occurred, for example, they've offered their ex-partner to pick up the kids at this time and the partner's refusing point blank to come and get them at all. What kind of thing do they document? What do they write?
Just give it often sort of Father's Day 2024, for instance, whatever date it is, or Christmas, and then save them into a little folder in your email address. I don't think you need to put much of your feelings into the email address, but you do need to put it somewhere. But this is like just the facts, just the evidence. And it allows you to read it again. Like when they, for the umpteenth time, tell you something didn't happen, you've got it there, you've got the proof. And then if your lawyer, if they get a letter from the other side and it accuses you of something or lying, then your lawyer is honor bound to ask you about it. And if it's just word against word, that's not as great as having even one bit of evidence, even one piece of evidence where you can say to the lawyer, that's nonsense.
Really?
Look. And so when the court doesn't know who to believe, he said, she said, sometimes it's that one piece of evidence. It might be a plane ticket. It might be a photo of something. It might be an invitation somewhere. One piece of actual solid evidence will make the court think, okay, this is who I'll believe.
Right. So that's our next step, and that is challenge their lies with evidence. It is the pretty much number one big thing that you can do. Keep your emotion out of it and challenge their lies with evidence. And like you've just said, Mum, sometimes it just takes one.
If you send it to them,
just one,
or their lawyer, then their lawyer is going to be calling their client in, hopefully, and saying, why did you tell a lie? Here's this. And they go, oh, maybe you forgot. But I'll guarantee you one thing. Well, I better not guarantee it, but pretty well always. If you send one bit of evidence contradicting them, if they're not in court or if they're not really going through lawyers, they'll just ignore it. If it doesn't fit their image of what happened, they'll just ignore it, which is why you will probably have to cut and paste it to respond to other things because they just won't answer it. They won't address it. And then you can use that evidence.
And that is what the DARVO system is. It's literally just deny it and then attack you and then reverse and make themselves the victim. So this is what we're coming up to with stick to the facts in your affidavits, etc. You might have been dealing with that DARVO method during the communication like when you've been writing emails to each other about picking up kids or doctor's appointments or whatever you're doing. You're dealing with that there, but then you deal with it in court. And the difference is you've basically narrative, mum. It can be really tricky to present so they imagine they've done something horrible, they've done something really, really bad, but then their affidavit is all these things that apparently that you've done that are just crazy. The mistake people sometimes make is instead of sticking to the facts and presenting what they have done, they immediately turn around and act like the abuser, and they are trying to defend themselves when literally they are the victim. So the DARVO system has worked there. So how do people avoid that from happening?
In the family courts, affidavits are the way of you telling the court your story. So do just that. In the first part of your affidavit, you will be addressing the facts and the concerns you've got and the things that the judge has to look at under the Family Law Act. And so that's your case. So do that first. And then you'll see that a lot of lawyers do it. And then it says, I refer, we used to crave leave. I crave leave to refer to the respondent's application or affidavit. We don't say that anymore because we don't have to beg, but you just say in response to their affidavit and using the same numbering, I say as follows, right? And that at the end of your affidavit. And then you can go through, use their numbering. And as to paragraph 1, I say this, as to paragraph 2, I say, and then you can respond. If you're in an intra-court situation where you've got those page limits and those annexure limits, then I think you need to use that little phrase that says, look, my lawyer has explained to me, or I understand the nature of an interim hearing and that there are limits on the pages and annexures I can provide. But I'll address the major ones and I would reserve the right to respond to the rest later on. So you don't have him or his lawyer or her lawyer say, he didn't respond to that, therefore they agree. No, you've got that little paragraph in there that says, I will reserve the right to respond later on. Yeah, so first things first, tell your story.
Now, that is brilliant, but just be aware, everyone, that this is just legal discussion, legal education. Please always get your own individual legal advice as each situation is different. So, of course, go and see a lawyer before you hand in an affidavit for court. Yeah. Mum's just offering some strategies. But you're right, Mum. So I can totally see the DARVO method works incredibly well for affidavit storytelling, especially for self-represented litigants who are just so petrified of an official judicial registrar or whatever thinking that they're a bad person. And the first thing you want to do is go, I'm not a bad person. People must list, these are why I'm not this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. And then the story gets lost.
Really cut to the quick, personally for me, was that this person had known me better, I thought, than anybody. And yet they could say those things about me that were completely untrue. So I turned into myself, and people do, and think, am I really that person? So then you start disbelieving yourself, and then they turn up. This isn't my experience, but I've seen they turn up with sort of lawyers and barristers and all so there's 3 of them there that are saying these things about you. And if they persuade the court believes it's tremendously guising. But you speak your truth. The court hasn't pre-decided. The barristers and lawyers are being paid. Okay, so you have to hope that truth will out at the end.
So it's DARVO on steroids when you go to court. And it really, really is a mental game for people. I've heard, we've got a lot of members going through it. But Mum, the last point that we want to raise to anyone going through this DARVO on steroids is that slow and steady, it will reveal itself if you follow the evidence, you don't use your emotion, you respond instead of react. slowly that Polaroid photo will develop, and it usually happens
right.
at the final trial, unfortunately.
I always say the Polaroid photo comes out blurry and then over time it clears up. So when they put a first affidavit in and you put a first affidavit in, if there's no other evidence, then the court has no idea who's right and who's wrong. But the only time that evidence gets tested in the witness box, where someone gets to ask them questions and put things to them to show them for the person they are, is at the final hearing. Or by the final hearing, you will have given your evidence into your best affidavit, and then their lawyers will be probably talking to them about whether they've been telling the truth and whether it should proceed. So truth does come out at the end. I have to believe that, or otherwise the whole legal system's a joke. But you have to have a lawyer who believes you from the beginning. You need a courageous lawyer, and they can help you withstand the attacks from other people. I think people do find the lawyer that gels with them. So if a narcissistic, manipulative person went in to see a lawyer and they said, well, I think we can settle this. How about we do it? That's not what they want to hear. No, I'm out. And they'll go, keep looking to find someone that agrees with their worldview.
And I think we've had a few people write in recently who have had to self-represent, who've gone to court, and they've done some of them themselves. And they do, for the first maybe 4 or 5, before you get to trial, you do feel, they say they feel disheartened, and actually one lady wrote in and said she was there with 2 other ladies, and they were all self-represented, and their exes all had a lawyer and a barrister and fancy suits and all standing over there dressed in black, looking ominous. And they were petrified, all of them, and all going probably through.
I've been thinking about why that happens so often, and I do think it's because a person who is manipulative and controlling and coercively controlling you during a relationship probably hasn't been very open-handed financially either. They set things up so maybe all your salary goes somewhere that can't be touched, or they'll freeze accounts. But on the other hand, they still have the money. And it's a real feature, isn't it, Laura, of people. We find that they can't afford a lawyer, and their ex won't let go of the money to help them afford a lawyer. So if that's you guys, think about legal aid, think about spousal maintenance, think about getting an interim distribution of property or a lump sum to help you with your costs. But, if you've got someone like this on the other side, they can really run up legal fees.
What was your trick, Mum? Because we had someone say that their lawyer asked for a distribution of property funds in advance and turned it down. But
so
what's your little trick for
legal
anyone
education
watching
only,
today?
Laura?
Need to start doing your disclosure but have no idea where to start? Feeling overwhelmed about mediation coming up? Or just trying to deal with negotiating with a manipulative ex? Then you need to go to thedivorcecourse.com.au to go to the free resources section, where you can get a mediation checklist, a disclosure checklist, get ahead of the game and be organised and ready, as this handy checklist, along with the accompanying episodes of the podcast, will be perfect for you. All you need to do is go to thedivorcecourse.com.au and go to the free resource section and download the free checklists today.
I'll be you for 5 minutes, but it is often the case. There's some money somewhere in the offset account or in a bank account, or you've sold the house and it's somewhere, and you need money to live on or to pay your legal fees. And if you ask for it, they may say no. But if you ask for it, say $100,000, and you say, and the other person can have $100,000 too, so that's equal. If they say no to that and you go to court, the court will look at them as maybe controlling. What's wrong with that? Why can't both of them have 100,000? Oh, I know, they'll be thinking, because you're coercively controlling it. You don't want your ex-partner to have any money at all.
Now, that might not always work, and that's just a discussion on a strategy, because everybody's situation is different and not everyone has $100,000
But it could be 30 or 20.
A strategy.
Where you come into trouble is if you're not prepared for the other person to get the same amount. Because the judges, they're doing these decisions without cross-examination. They don't know who's telling the truth. So they're happy to give usually a little bit to each of you, as long as it's not going to be more than you would ultimately get at trial. Get some legal advice, and talk to someone about it. That's a good strategy.
So we want everyone here today to think of their ex, if they've started using the DARVO strategy on you, as that little old man hiding behind the big scary curtain in The Wizard of Oz, and go and look behind it and be like, gotcha. So take some of that away. We want you to try and only communicate via email or letter or using a communication app. Have those firm boundaries from the start, because that's usually where people get evidence to show emotion or crazy or whatever it is. Stay on point. Try and use the communication compass. Be nice, short, exact, and without emotion in all your communication. Business-like. Number 4, respond instead of react, because they need the crazy so they can use it as evidence that you're crazy. So if you use emotion, you're going to lose. So keep the emotion, keep calm, find some ways to keep your boundaries so your sanity stays intact. Number 5, keep receipts, keep evidence. Use ARC, use
a word salad, read a letter like a pro checklist, and also a before you go checklist.
the Empower You app. Send yourself emails, create an email account, put a time and a date, and be brief about what's happened so you can always go back to it and check. Number 6, stick to the facts. In your affidavits, in your communications with lawyers, in your trial, stick to the facts. Number 7, challenge their lies with evidence. Okay, that is the silver bullet in this situation. And number 8, slowly the story will develop. You just have to have patience, and you've got to give them enough room to show their true selves, and it will happen.
Yeah, I think that it's helpful to know that they're not extra special. I have a lot of people over the years who tell me how awful their ex is, how they will convince everyone how smart they are and all of that. But they're not special. It's often that sort of relationship that ends up in court because 2 reasonable people could have a discussion. And I don't think it's something they've learned. It's just a strategy that we've observed, and other people who've created the strategy have observed is common amongst them. So they're almost like puppets of their own mindset. So you're able to shift your mindset around. They can't. They're that little bloke behind with the controls, and they can't risk all of this coming away. And so that it's coming from a place of fear, I think, not a psychologist, but I do think that a strong woman, and it is often the women who are being bullied, but a strong response can really set them back on their heels a bit, because the closer you get to the truth, the more harmful and hurtful it is for them, and the more scary the case is. So you can deal with them.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mum. And I do think that most of this DARVO to start with is just, I'm going to say this and see what they react like. Let's watch them sit back and watch the fireworks. So the best thing you can do is not give them that satisfaction. And whilst you can't grey rock, which seems to be a great strategy when it comes to narcissists, you can't do that in this instance because you may be going to court and that can be used against you. You need to find other ways, and you can do that. You can still, to an extent, protect yourself and set up those boundaries. But yeah, you just got to be aware that the emotion is what they're trying to get to. And they're going to deliberately say and do the things that you know, that they know are going to hurt you the most. And it takes it's a hard road, but very strong. People make it through. You will all make it through.
Because you're really, when you write stuff, don't think that you're writing it to your ex-partner. Think that you're writing it to their lawyer, because you don't have to convince your ex-partner. They already actually know what happened. They're just lying. They know what happened. So you don't have to try and convince them. Just keep the receipts, and when the time's appropriate, keep your photos wherever that you've gathered and just send it over to the lawyer, because the lawyer has the job then of convincing the court. And if they're not going to win, they can start having a hard conversation with your ex.
That's valid, Mum. That you're never going to get your ex, if they're this type of person, to go, oh, you're so right. I definitely am wrong. I'm so glad you wrote that message to me, because they're never going to do that. They're just going to continue
deny. That's right. So you don't have those crime shows where the person in the witness box goes, I did it.
Yes, unfortunately. So look, if anyone's interested, we have some great episodes on dealing with narcissists. We've got the narcissistic playbook, the things that Mum has seen people do countless times. And you can just follow it along and you'll probably turn out if you've got a narcissistic ex, they'll probably do all the same thing. That's the great thing about them. They're predictable. We've also got negotiating with an iron fist but a velvet glove, which is really good for mediation. And can you mediate with a narcissist?
Laura, you can.
You can, yes. No one believes us until they listen to the episode. And then they're like, oh, because everyone's like, you can't mediate with a narcissist. But there are things that you can do. So go and listen to those episodes if that is you today. And thank you, everybody who's been writing in. And our Patreon members did a poll, Mum, and they voted for this topic. So that's why we've done this today. So if you're interested in Patreon, where Mum discusses cases and we have helpful printable handouts, etc., that go hand in hand with these episodes, go and find us on Patreon. We are the Divorce Course podcast there as well.
No
All right.
worries, Laura.
Thank you, Mum, for your time. And good luck, everybody. We're thinking of you.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.